Good morning. Welcome to Ripon Community Church. My name is Sam. I'm one of the pastors here. I want to start with a few scenarios that maybe you're familiar with. The first is this. They met by chance. A friend of a friend at a little gathering. As casually as they could muster, they shared numbers with one another. The following weekend was their first date. And by everyone's account, they fell deeply and madly in love. Scenario 2. It was the third grade. The first class they had together. They sat next to each other, shared a PB&J sandwich. They both liked playing stuck in the mud. They became fast friends. Scenario 3. She was their first child. Holding her for the first time felt like a miracle. They never wanted to let her go. They call it falling in love, and it's not just for romance. And while we often hesitate to use that word love with friends, that's certainly a kind of love too, right? And they call it falling because falling feels effortless. It just kind of happens. The hormones help, for sure, in certain cases, right? But it's more than that as well. It's just a reality. It's something that we just fall into. And we love these stories. We love the movies they make about it. Some of us live off of the thrill of these movies. They're exciting and filled with emotion. But the stories we read and watch often end right after that falling part, don't they? Right when the falling in love part has happened, they say, all right, happily ever after, it's going to be great. And we're all left wondering, I wonder if it actually happened. It's too bad, too, because all of the interesting stuff really happens after the falling part. Today, this week, and next week, we're talking about relationships. The series is called Healthy Relationships Are Hard. It's a real no-brainer, right? We all know this to be true. We've experienced this. But the reason we're talking about this at this time is because February is a really hard month on relationships. I don't know if you know this or not, but there's actually a day called Red Tuesday. Has anybody ever heard of Red Tuesday? Raise your hands. Nobody, but I looked this up. It was a thing. Tuesday, it's the Tuesday before Valentine's Day. It's the day when the most breakups happen all year round. I know, right? It's just hilarious. There are some companies actually that are trying to benefit off of this. There's this. We have it. Okay, this is Pizza Hut. It's the goodbye pie. Right, I think the tagline was spicy news in a sweet box or something, in a sweet package. The idea is you don't want to actually have to do this, so you send this package of pizza, you'd order it to their place, and you have the note of, I'm sorry, we're done, but at least you got pizza, right? And pizza never tasted the same again after that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this is real, but it's real. Nobody better do that in here, okay? No, not happening. We're well aware of this, right? We're well aware that after the falling in love part, the hard work of relationships, that's when it begins. Because when it gets hard, we sometimes chicken out. We sometimes take the easy way out. We sometimes send them pizza, right? It's why when that initial buzz of those early days wears off, we find ourselves saying things like, you know what? I don't need to put that much effort in. I don't need to put that much effort in. It's not like they're living up to their end of this marriage. They're not putting the work in, or this relationship. Or we say things like, you know what? They're not interested in me anymore. Why should I even try? Or it's even in like a friendship, right, where we say things like, they never text me anymore. I'm always the one that's texting them and initiating some type of hangout or conversation. Why should I bother if they don't put the time in to reach out to me? Why would I even put the effort in? Falling in love, starting a friendship, that's the easy part. That's why we call it falling. Starting a friendship isn't the hard part. A shared interest or a shared enemy will often do it, right? They'll start that friendship. Becoming a parent, it is so difficult not to love that child. Do you know what's hard? What's hard are healthy, long-lasting relationships. But do you know what brings the most value? The most meaning? And often the most joy to our lives? The most satisfaction and purpose in life? Long, steady, healthy relationships. And so if that's the case, then why are the good ones, the lasting ones, the ones that endure long past the Hollywood stage of falling in love or starting a friendship or becoming a family, why are those so hard to hold on to? Why is it so difficult to grasp that and hold it? It's a really long and complicated answer, but here's the short version of it, right? It's because they require something that feels unnatural. It says this in Matthew 20, 25 through 28. It says, "But Jesus called them together and said, 'You know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you, it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be the first among you must become your slave. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many.'" That verse is Jesus redefining leadership. So in the past, right, and we still experience this all over the place, where leaders lord it over people, they're demanding, they're saying, "You do this for me or else." It's that kind of demeanor, but Jesus, when he talks about leadership, he says, hey, the way that you go about leading people is by serving them and caring for them. That's how you do it, and the beautiful part about that is that principle of leadership applies perfectly to healthy relationships. It's the same thing. A whole lot of our culture, of the culture around us, says anything good should come naturally. Nothing could be further from the truth. The following part may come naturally, but the next natural step is lording it over people. It's you do this for me or else. It's flaunting authority. It's I'm going to go get what I want and what I deserve. I don't know why I have a southern accent when I say that, but it comes out. The long, good, rewarding kinds of relationships require something different. They require enduring struggle. They require enduring pain and hardship together. Most of all, they often require putting the needs and desires of others ahead of our own. And that does not come naturally, but it's the model that Jesus gives us. I mean, it's easy to forget. Jesus, he was the type of person who came into this world and taught people these incredible things and did these miraculous things and had people that followed him, but he didn't call his followers servants. He called them friends. I mean, look what it says. It says, "I no longer call you servants because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command. Love each other." Here's what I find fascinating about this passage and so counter to most of the culture around us. First, Jesus calls them friends. That in and of itself is fascinating and amazing. That means, by extension, we can experience friendship with Jesus. Like deep, long-lasting, supportive friendship with Jesus. Second, the command that Jesus gives us is to love each other. That kind of love is an action. It's not a feeling. It's an active thing. It's something we do. It's love each other. It's a verb, not a noun, right? It's a doing thing. I'm going to actively love somebody. That's his command to us, to love others. And friendships and romantic relationships and family relationships, they can experience the good feeling of love, but that feeling of love will only be regularly present when it is paired with the choice of love. It's a choice over and over and over again. Now, as we go through today and next week, Sunday, a couple of caveats that I want to make sure we talk about here. As we talk about relationships, this series could be a year long, and we still wouldn't cover everything. There's so much in relationships. Half of the Bible is just about relationships, maybe more. It's just how relationships should function. So what we're going to do is not be able to cover everything. We're going to spend 2 weeks, and the purpose of this 2 weeks is awareness. It's awareness. It's not invasive surgery. We're not going into this really deep level and doing crazy deep surgery on these nuanced areas of relationships. We're not doing that. This is more like a checkup. You go to the doctor and they check a few things inside of you, and they're quick indicators of if there's underlying areas happening inside of you. And so as we go through that this week and next week, be looking for indicators. It's like going to the doctor to get a checkup. Is there more work that needs to be done here? Are there follow-ups that need to be followed up on? If there are warning signs, then take the next steps. On your program, in your bulletin, there's a couple of books on there that you can take a look at. I've read both of those books recently, and I would recommend them for both marriages and for parenting. But also, there's counseling. And counseling, if it's something you haven't had a chance to do yet, it's something that would be helpful to you as you're looking for underlying things here. Don't be afraid to reach out. I've personally, and Meg, have gone to counseling, not because our marriage was falling apart. It wasn't. It was because we needed it to be healthy and to sustain leadership at a high level. You need to be healthy or you do fall apart. And so I can't recommend that enough. And if you need references, reach out. We have a list of great counselors. But again, this is a checkup. This is not invasive surgery. This will not fix your marriage or your relationships these 2 weeks. It could start to show you the ways that it might begin to heal. Now, one more caveat is this. Relationships are often the source of our greatest joys. They're also the source of some of our greatest pain. There is no 3-step process here. It is so much more complicated and nuanced than that. It is difficult. Some of you have experienced deep loss, and this is just hard. Others of you have been in abusive relationships. You need to know that your safety and health should never be put at risk. So please reach out if you're in need of help. Today, the hope is that we might do a few things here. We might cover 4 basic reasons why relationships are hard and how God teaches us in the Bible to move toward a more healthy and God-honoring way of navigating those relationships. Next week, I'm actually going to invite my wife Meg up on stage with me, and we're going to have a discussion about why this stuff is so hard. Now, it's going to be a little bit different than a normal Sunday, and we're going to talk about what's helped our marriage, what's helped our parenting. We do not have all the answers by any stretch of the imagination, but this will be another great chance for awareness and just, hey, we struggle with this stuff too, kind of conversation. But if you have questions, things that you want to have talked about, don't be afraid to submit those. Grab your Connect card in front of you. Fill it up online. Send in a question. You can do that through just sending me an email this week. Feel free to. We'd love to have those and just know what you're hoping to hear about and talk about. But this week, we have 4 reasons that relationships are hard, and we're going to name them. It's not an exhaustive list, but then we're going to give biblical frameworks for addressing them. The first one is this: selfishness and entitlement. We're just going right for it. You're like, this is the case study right here. Just kidding. Don't do that. No elbowing today, okay? But the reality is that we're selfish. Oh my goodness, we're selfish. It's just who we are. This is our natural state. This is who we are. It's not our Jesus-like state. When selfishness and entitlement take root, relationships become about what we can get out of them, not what we can give to them. And as you think about that, just doing the math, if 2 people are trying to get whatever they can out of a relationship, there won't be very much left in the relationship, right? Just doing the math here, it doesn't work very well. Number 2. Miscommunication and unclear expectation. Have you ever heard the term clear as mud? or me talk words, right? It's hard sometimes to use those things. It's very difficult. Having communication is hard, right? And wars between countries have been started because people aren't able to communicate or listen clearly. Have you ever been there, a war in your own house? Anybody? Okay, it's real. Again, no, I'm sorry, I shouldn't ask you to raise your hands. Okay. Marriages and friendships and family relationships are no different. This is a reality that we live in. That's the second reason that these things are hard. The third reason is this: relationships as an obligation. This is a tricky one. This one, if I'm honest, is probably one I struggle with the most. It's easy to flip that switch in your brain where as soon as you start caring for someone because it's a task on a checklist, somehow it stops being meaningful. Doesn't mean as much. When you serve someone out of obligation, it stops being about the person you care about, and it starts becoming about what you're doing to help them. You become the main character, not the person you're serving. It becomes about what you're doing, not how you're actually helping them and they're being helped. Number 4, the grass is greener effect. Most of the time, we think of this in terms of romantic relationships, and that's true, but it impacts other relationships too. The problem with this one is this fact: people are people everywhere. Whether you're here or across the world, people are still people. And all people have quirks. Let me tell you a secret: all people's breath stinks. So do their farts. So it's true. It's a real thing. I don't know if you know this or not, but you don't see someone's rough parts until you get close to them. And when you've made choices to get close enough that you start to realize all of those stinky things, it's often too late. This temptation makes relationships hard because we compare. And it's always, always, always an unfair comparison. So those are the 4 things, right? 4 things, 4 of many. There are a bunch of other things that make relationships difficult. But with these 4 ways that relationships get difficult, what does the Bible say about them? How does God direct us to work with these difficult situations? We're going to address them. We're going to go in reverse order. We're going to start with that grass is greener effect. This one comes right out of the 10 Commandments. God, like right from the beginning, is, hey, this is the bad one. This is the hard one. Don't miss it. It says this. It says, you must not covet your neighbor's house, want or desire what your neighbor has. You must not covet your neighbor's wife, male or female servant, ox or donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. We don't have the ox and donkey problem very much anymore. Now we have the car and the house. We have the vacations. We have their Instagram reel. We have whatever things that they show for us to want. And it is literally at our fingertips. We can see it like crazy. I mean, this is one of the 10 Commandments because it's just not good for you. Everything looks better from a distance, and that's especially true for people, and even more so when it's through a screen. God's antidote for coveting, for wanting what someone else has, it starts with gratitude. Friendship and marriage and these close relationships that we have, our families, I mean, these are the greatest gifts God gives to us. Children are a gift. When we stop seeing these people in our lives as gifts, we start comparing and looking for something better, like they're a commodity. That game only ends in misery. There's so much more here, but like I said, this is a checkup. This is not surgery. So I'm just going to give you a question to ask yourself for each of these as we go through. And the question is this: if I find myself coveting a different relationship, how am I making that person out to be better than they really are? because I'm looking at them from a distance, and we don't smell anything from a distance. We don't experience anything from a distance. None of their rough spots are available, and so they are, by nature, because we're coveting from a distance, we're not seeing any of the rough spots. And then how can I be grateful for what I've got instead? Number 2, relationships as an obligation. And one of my favorite passages in all of Scripture is Romans chapter 12. I read it on a regular basis. It's just so blunt. It's like just so clear. Like it says right here, it says, don't just pretend to love others. Really love them. Hate what is wrong. Hold tightly to what is good. Love each other with genuine affection. And take delight in honoring each other. Take delight in honoring each other. I love that. It's so blunt and true, right? Love each other with genuine affection. We know when we're doing this, and we know when we're not, if we're honest with ourselves. We know when the thing we're doing, when the thing we call love is really just an act. Something we're doing to check a box because, man, we got to get them off our back. You ever experienced that before? There's a word in that verse that can help us do that. It's delight. There was a time in these relationships you have, whether it's with your kids or your parents or your spouse or your friends, when just being around them, even if it was serving them, was something you just delighted in. It was fun. It was joyful. You got to be close to them. Back when you were first dating, man, you would do anything for them, and it was a joy. It wasn't work. There is this sense in which you can recapture that and remember that they are a gift that you get to delight in. It's not an obligation. It's something we get to do together. This is tricky. It's hard. You can fall into this over and over again. But remind yourself regularly that this is a delight. This is the person that God has gifted you with. Enjoy it. Question to ask yourself: am I checking a box on a list, or am I choosing to enjoy, to delight in serving and caring for this person? Am I checking a box on a list, or am I choosing to enjoy, delight in serving and caring for this person? The next one: miscommunication and unclear expectations. The Bible is littered with wisdom on how to best use our words and communicate them well. In Proverbs chapter 12, it says this: some people make cutting remarks, but the words of the wise bring healing. Truthful words stand the test of time, but lies are soon exposed. Do you make cutting remarks? Do you know what a cutting remark feels like? I'm guessing you do. Do you know what a healing comment feels like? Have you experienced that before? In Ephesians 4:15 it says, instead, we will speak the truth in love, growing every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of his body, the church. Our words, they have tremendous power, more than we'll ever really know. What we say has vast implications, sometimes for years and years beyond we say the words. I mean, I can remember cutting comments that I've experienced still today. And I experienced them when I was a young child. I'm guessing you can too. But I can also remember the latter. The healing comments, the kindness, the encouragement. I can remember those years later too. One of the key points in these verses is truth. What's true? I found that one of the hardest places to speak the truth is in our expectations with each other. We all live with constant expectations for each other and from each other. When it comes to marriage or friendship or any kind of important relationship, being honest and truthful about expectations can be incredibly helpful. But getting this right will take way more effort than we think. I mean, healthy expectations, this is what they look like. It's something that's clearly stated. How often do we say, like, yeah, I'd really like to go to Disney World? And then years later, your spouse is like, oh, I didn't know that was something you actually wanted, right? It's clearly stated. I would like to go here this time. I would like you to, make dinner once a week. That is a clearly stated thing. Maybe that's something that you've talked about before. It's clearly stated. It's also mutually agreed upon. We're going to share the laundry duties. That sounds like a great idea. Or maybe, hey, we're going to share the laundry duties, and then there's no agreement there. And then a couple weeks later, hey, I said we were going to share the laundry duties. And they're like, I didn't agree to that. We didn't have this conversation. You just said it. I didn't agree. The other one is reasonable and realistic. You're going to do all the laundry. You're going to do all the cooking. You're going to do all the shoveling. You're going to do all the mowing the grass. You're going to do all the grocery shopping. When the list gets pretty high after a while, like, this is not realistic. This is not reasonable. This is not a real expectation. And then finally, it's flexible. Flexible. See, the thing here is, I've heard it said you should never have any expectations, and I get that. Like, you shouldn't. You should live life walking in with open hands. There's a goodness to that truth. But at the very same time, we live with desires. We live with hopes and dreams. And so if we can be honest about those and also flexible about those, it can be really helpful. Because if you aren't, if there's no flexibility there, then we're going to be really angry all the time because we're human and we're going to fall short. So ask yourself this question: are your expectations honest, stated, agreed on, realistic, and flexible? Last one, selfishness and entitlement. In the end, it all gets really simple. John 3:16 it says, "For this is how God loved the world. He gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have eternal life." The key word there is gave. And for us as humans, we cannot give what we haven't received. And the only place we can receive the love that will last is from Jesus. And experiencing the unconditional love of Jesus is the foundational antidote to selfishness and entitlement. To experience this, we need time. We need to allow Jesus to love us, right? Like, we can't just go off and say, all right, I checked that box, now I'm good. No, like, this is a daily thing that it's helpful to experience. To spend time reading the Bible helps us remind ourselves of this, to spend time praying and accepting and remembering what God has done for us helps us experience this. To do that as a community, as a group of people at church, helps us remember and experience this love that God has given to us and remember what's true. Because here's the thing, at the end of the day, the healthiest relationships that I'm aware of are drawn together and sustained by Jesus' love. As a staff, we were talking about this on Thursday and just kind of roundtable discussing this. In the end, what we talked about is the best kinds of relationships, well, they just mirror Jesus. They just look like how Jesus' relationships look. That's just at the end of the day what they look like, right? Jesus, he had clear purpose, but at the very same time, Jesus was patient and interruptible. He was set out resolutely to do good things, but he also would pause in the middle of a mission, so to speak, and help somebody. At the very same time, Jesus didn't neglect his own needs. He would take time for prayer. He would take time to be alone with God. He would eat, and people said he ate a lot and drank good wine and did the good things. He didn't neglect himself like it was like some person who wasn't without needs, right? He needed these good things as a human person. But ultimately, in the end, Jesus was willing to give everything himself. It says if we're going to call it love, then it needs to be love. And this is how it's defined in John chapter 15. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Following Jesus requires that we die to our own selfish desires over and over and over and over again. This is why a healthy relationship will often look the opposite of what we see around us in culture, because that's not what the world often tells us. Ultimately, The purpose of our relationships is to point to Jesus in them and through them. Doing this will sanctify us. It'll have a sanctifying effect. That's a fancy word for basically Jesus using these relationships to chisel away at the parts of us that are not of him. Like a hammer and a chisel, sometimes it hurts. Knocking away at these pieces. Imagine with me for a moment. Just imagine. You see this couple. They're sitting there next to each other. Smiles on their faces. It's one of those moments of remembering. Remembering all they'd endured together. It had not been easy. But they had chosen over and over and over again to love each other, to serve each other. And that had made it last. It had also made it good. They were now looking at their marriage as a real gift from God. Imagine two men casting out a line with their fishing rods from the shore. The old men sit on camping chairs, didn't catch many fish, but they'd enjoyed each other's company for years. That was the point. They'd always showed up for each other when it was needed. They'd shown each other Jesus over and over through the years. Sure, they'd annoyed each other a ton, but they'd never stopped showing up. And then one more. She walked in the door, little kids in tow, tired but happy to be with her parents. They'd always been there, even when she'd run the other way. It wasn't easy loving that way. They'd been tempted to give up. But they were reminded God hadn't ever given up on them. Healthy relationships are hard, but they're worth it. If anyone believed this to be true, it was Jesus. Jesus, who experienced deep betrayal, yet still chose to love, even on the cross. None of this is easy. It's where our greatest sorrows are often found. But it's also the place God gifts us with the greatest joys. Would you pray with me? Dear God, we recognize that you have given us this gift of relationships, of having a relationship with you first and foremost through your Son Jesus, and then having relationships with others, spending time with people, caring for people, allowing them to care for us. We know it's hard. We know these things creep in like selfishness and entitlement and doing things out of obligation and all the other things. But God, remind us of how you love us. Help us to take that way of loving, experience it, receive it, and then give it away. And then, God, help open our eyes to the gifts of the relationships in our life and treat them that way. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.